Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in to part one of a five-part series called Real Food, Real Health. Now, I really appreciate you giving up your time on a Sunday night to listen to me. I'll be speaking for about half an hour on what I've named Back to Food Basics. So I'll be discussing, what is real food versus artificial food, and the concept of nutrigenomics as well. So I will get into that in a little bit more detail later on in the webinar. I guess a little bit about myself to start. So I grew up in the Northern Territory. I was born in the Northern Territory and then later on moved to Yeppoon in Central Queensland. And I grew up amongst a community of food producers, and it was really this connection with agriculture, this grassroots connection that led me to choose a career in nutritional medicine and holistic health. And I really developed a strong appreciation for where the food on our plates actually comes from. So more recently, I've established a practice which specialises in naturopathy, nutritional medicine and holistic health. And I hold a Bachelor of Health Science in Nutrition, in Health Science, which majors in nutrition, naturopathy, herbal medicine and also integrated pharmacology, which looks at the relationship between complementary medicines and conventional medicine. And at the moment I'm studying my Master's in Human Nutrition, so I'm fairly busy and it's good. It's really nice to be in such an exciting arena, so I hope to impart some of my knowledge with you tonight. So part one, as I said, I'll be getting back to basics in regards to what is real food. And real food versus artificial food, I'll be giving you some examples there. What is nutrigenomics as well? So I'll be talking a little bit about epigenetics and nutrigenomics and how food can actually affect us on a genetic function. Part two, which will be in a couple of weeks, and Sarah will email you the dates for this, will be on obesity and why we are an obese nation at the moment, the latest research surrounding weight loss diets, what's fueling the obesity epidemic and what we can do about this. Part three will be on inflammation, so why are we all on fire at the moment? And I'll be discussing a lot of foods to reduce inflammation, so a lot of that webinar will be food as medicine. And we'll be also be talking about, what's stoking our inflammatory fire at the moment as well. Part four will be on brain food, so nutrition for the brain. And part five will be on traditional eating. So this really gets back to what I'll be discussing today as well, so the concept of real food, but more so how real food relates to our ancestral health and our history, our health history. So I'll be talking about the theories, principles and philosophies surrounding the hunter-gatherer diet, also known as the paleo diet or primal eating, and how we can then implement this ancient lifestyle into our modern world. So what is nutritional medicine? Well, there's definitely a growing awareness amongst the public regarding the food we eat and how this can really influence our health and well-being. And there's mounting evidence to suggest or to expand our understanding of the profound effects that these foods actually have on our body. So one of the underlying principles of nutritional medicine is that each person is really unique and therefore has very unique nutritional requirements. The beauty, I guess, of nutritional medicine, and what I think is the beauty of nutritional medicine, is that it works with the body's natural biochemistry rather than against it, and it really works to restore what we call homeostasis. That's basically our innate ability to bring our body back into balance, and our innate ability to heal ourselves as well. And nutritional medicine really works with this homeostasis and promotes homeostasis, so it promotes balance. Before I get into the nitty-gritty of nutritional medicine, I want to introduce you to the blue zones. Basically, National Geographic, Dan Buettner, a man called Dan Buettner, and also the National Institute of Health in America, they got together and they thought, let's go around to the civilizations around the world that live to be 100, and they live to be 100 healthily. So what they did was went around to communities that had the highest number per capita of centenarians, so people that lived till they were 100 years or over. Not only did they live to this age, but they lived to this age with extraordinary rigour and quality of life. They studied several different civilizations from around the world. Some of them were off Japan. There was one called the island of Sardinia, just off Greece, and also Seven-Day Adventist community in Los Angeles. So they looked at these different communities and cultures and they thought, what is the recipe for healthy aging and longevity? They found quite a few things. There was common ties between all these cultures and communities. One of the most fundamental aspects was that they all had a purpose in life. So there was very much a sense of connection, a sense of tribe, family mattered. There was a sense of belonging and staying very socially active within the community. Quite often these people were quite spiritual. They had big belief systems and they were naturally active. So they didn't exercise per se, but their lifestyles were conducive to physical activity. So some of them tended to their gardens, others rode their bike in and out of town each day. So they were what I would call as naturally active. In regards to their diet, they ate a predominantly plant-based diet and they had a very high ratio in their body of omega-3 fatty acids as well. So they did consume some animal products, obviously, as well as the plant-based products, but these were all very high in omega-3 fatty acids. So they were your grass-fed variety of animal. And your wild game as well. The other thing that the civilization in Japan, in Okinawa, Japan, what they actually did, they actually had a saying, and they said this before eating, and it was called their Hari Hachibu. What this means is that they actually only ate until they were 80% full, so they never overate as well. There was a big sense of mindful eating, and a lot of these civilizations ate a lot of nuts as well. So when I say plant-based diet, I'm talking about fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and legumes. Now, what they found at the end of, it was a very long-winded story for you to get to the point, but what they actually found was that the dietary intake of these people accounted for up to 70% of their health and longevity. And the link on your screen there down the bottom is a link by Dan Buettner on TED.com. It's a great talk. It's only about 20 minutes and it's on these blue zones, and I would highly recommend that you have a look at that. But what this shows is that our diet has a very profound influence on our health and longevity. Food as medicine, look, it's a very old concept. As Hippocrates said, who was the father of medicine and the father of functional food, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. Another example of the history of food as medicine as well is in traditional Chinese medicine, which dates back thousands and thousands of years. They say that when a person is sick, the doctor should first regulate the patient's diet and lifestyle. I couldn't agree more. I think we've lost our way a little bit and we just need to get back to these fundamental concepts. So the drug and disease paradigm is costly. It definitely is. Health practice in Australia is still focused on the treatment of disease as opposed to its prevention, and also as opposed to the optimisation of health or wellness, what I would call. So it's very much a disease model, and I think what many naturopaths and lifestyle advisors work in the field of wellness, and I'm very proud to say that I do work in the field of wellness because I think it's very important. It's simply not enough to be absent of signs and symptoms and disease. You really need to be feeling well, be thriving, and be feeling vital. And research in the field of nutritional medicine, like I said, is growing at such a phenomenal rate. And also now that the human genome has been sequenced, the science supporting nutrition in preventing disease is actually more impressive than ever. In my opinion, there's no excuse for not using this emerging evidence in a really constructive way. Not only is nutritional medicine and complementary medicine conducive to wellness, and it's part of this wellness model, but it's very cost effective. And recently Access Economics announced that expanding the use of complementary and nutritional medicines could maintain excellent patient outcomes while saving hundreds of millions of dollars a year in healthcare costs. So by analysing treatment on a case-by-case basis, They showed that patients could actually save a considerable amount of money using nutritional medicines. So they compared things like fish oil versus mainstream medications for the prevention of heart disease and rheumatoid arthritis. You know, they had a look at acupuncture for chronic pain. They also had a look at St. John's wort, hypericum is the Latin binomial of that name, for mild to moderate depression. So getting back on track now, the modern nutritional landscape, as you would be fully aware, is absolutely full of contradictions and complexity. Now, we have to eat and we have to drink and we simply can't opt out. And, you know, a search of, I plugged in diet books into Amazon and there was over 65,000 books that came up when I plugged that into Amazon. So, you know, I guess these days, due to savvy marketing and media scare tactics and the internet and a blogosphere that actually seems to confuse us more than help us, most of us have lost our way and we really have forgotten what real food is. I also wanted to mention that I do feel a lot of people abuse the word diet. Now, what I mean by that is, you know, we've gotten by pretty well for the last 200,000 generations without one single dietary book. And, you know, I do believe rather than looking for answers in these, you know, thousands and thousands of dietary books, we have to look at what our ancestors did for many, many years. And what they actually did is they ate real food. And that's what I'm talking to you tonight about. Now, it really is one size fits all that fits nobody, and I often think of our food pyramid when I read this statement. There's a few reasons why the one size fits all doesn't fit anybody, but coming back to the confusion and the contradictions in you know, nutritional medicine is always remember that nutritional research has a very short half-life, and what we think is proven is yet to be unproven with updated information. It's a rapidly changing arena. Now, these frightening figures, and this article was published just last week in the Daily Telegraph. So the modern Western diet, and I equate that to the SAD diet. Now, what SAD stands for is the Standard Australian Diet, unfortunately. So what they found was that 91% of adults didn't eat enough vegetables per day. So that's 9 out of 10 people that weren't reaching these vegetable marks. About a quarter of all children are overweight or obese, and about 60% of adults are overweight or obese. About half of all adults aren't eating enough fruit. This is pretty frightening, and you know, I guess how do we combat this? Well, like I said, we learn from the lessons of our ancestors and we get back to food basics. So if you look at the human dietary experience, as you can see, we did live essentially as hunter-gatherers for about 200,000 generations. And up the top there, you'll see that these highly processed fast foods have only been around for about 2 generations. So look, to put it really simply, our bodies simply, I mean, they haven't had time to adjust to these foods, and so we do recognise a lot of these modern foods as foreign. I guess the other point to mention as well, which I will be getting into, is that, you know, our modern food is very pro-inflammatory. So, for example, the meat that was consumed in the hunter-gatherer era was a different composition to the kind of meat that we're eating today. So I'll be discussing this more in the 5th webinar on traditional eating, but not only have our food patterns changed, but the composition of the food has changed markedly as well in a very short period of time. So as you can see here, you know, you've got your primitive man. About 99% of their diet was vegetables, fruits, roots, legumes, and nuts. And I would suggest that they were eating, you know, more vegetables and plant-based foods than what we are now. So if you compare that to the article I just showed you earlier, you know, only 1 out of 10 people are meeting their recommended daily intake for vegetable consumption, which is about 5 servings of vegetables per day. If you have a look at the modern man's diet there, so you've got your refined grains, your refined artificial sugars and sweeteners, accounting for about 3/4 of the diet. So the Western human diet today is fundamentally different to what it was throughout the majority of human evolution. I'm sure if you have read a book called Primal Body, Primal Mind by Nora Godorith, and I think that that's a great book to read. And again, we will be touching on this in the 5th webinar. I think this is one of the most fabulous quotes, and I think that Boyd Epstein really sums it up nicely when he says, "Current epidemics of chronic disease may be a result of discordance between our ancient genes and our modern lifestyle." So nutrition. This is a little bit of Nutrition 101. Look, we've got our calories and we've got our non-calories. So our calories are things like our carbohydrates, our fats and our protein, and all the various byproducts of those macronutrients as well. And then we've got our non-calories. So we've got our water, vitamins and minerals, and I would also add our phytochemicals to that. So we definitely need to eat our calories for energy, but we need to eat our nutrients for life. And there's a lot of food at the moment that is calorie rich and nutrient poor. These are the kind of foods that we need to steer away from because we really need a good balance of both. So what is real food? Well, it's something that nourishes, sustains and supplies. It's true and actual and it's not artificial. So my definition and my take on what real food is that, you know, point one is that there's a level of connectedness from the consumer to the place of origin. So this whole paddock to plate philosophy and this paddock to plate movement that's happening at the moment is really, really important in promoting real food. Number two, it doesn't usually come in a packet and it isn't generally marketed as a health food. And I'll be explaining why we should be wary of health claims, especially when they're written on packets. Number three, it's grown in real soil. That's a pretty important one right there. And number four, the food has a level of intelligence and vitality. And I'll be talking more about this a little bit later on as well. Here are some examples for you. So we've got real food versus fake food. Now, the foods you can see, or the artificial food, the foods you can see in this artificial yogurt, the kind of ingredients that I was discussing earlier when I said they've only been around for a couple of generations. So I look at real food as being nourishing and this artificial food as being very foreign. What I do as well sometimes is I'll take people through the supermarkets, or I'll simply simply teach them how to read a label, a nutritional label, and look past the marketing on the front of the packet. Obviously, when you can get your food elsewhere, it's rather than a supermarket, it's preferable. But in Gladstone, where I live, people don't generally have a lot of options. So we do head to the supermarket to learn how to look for real food in this kind of environment. What people generally do is they look at the nutritional panel of the food and they'll see the calories, they'll see the sugar, they'll look at the fat, they'll look at the sodium. What they're not looking at is the actual ingredients of the food. So I guess I'm really encouraging you to not so much focus on the nutritional composition when it comes to the food panel, but really look at the nutritional composition when it comes to the actual ingredients. This is another example of real food versus artificial food. As you can see, the chicken McNuggets only have about 56% chicken, which is really concerning in the first place. Amongst those ingredients is hydrogenated soybean oils and a mixture of canola and corn and soybean oils. Now these oils have been hydrogenated. They're very dangerous for our bodies and very unhealthy for us, and you would know them as trans fats. Other ingredients which are of a concern to me is right down the bottom, if you can see my cursor there, is TBHQ, which is a petroleum butane byproduct, and also this anti-foaming agent down the bottom as well. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff that goes into our food that we're not aware of. Simply another example of real food versus artificial food. Now, the artificial food, example in this one, that muesli bar there, it's very poor quality ingredients, and therefore the health benefits not only are minimal, but it's actually very detrimental to our health to be consistently consuming foods like this. But I think this slide really speaks for itself. So, you've got your whole nourishing foods compared to processed synthetic and artificial ingredients with the artificial food there. Now, another point I wanted to make when we are discussing nutrition and how not to get caught up with health labels and clever marketing is that we tend to take, unfortunately, a reductionist approach when it comes to nutrition. So to give you an example, we can look at an orange as merely being a source of vitamin C. And then we're told that, a glass of processed fruit juice, for example, also contains a high level of vitamin C. And after a whirlwind of clever marketing and nutritional spin, we somehow arrive at the conclusion that a glass of juice is actually an orange's equivalent. This is a big problem, and we need to be mindful of these health claims and remember that you can't make a junk or a bad food good simply by adding something good to it. The point of the story here is just try to get as close as possible to the natural source. So next I want to speak to you about epigenetics. This is a really exciting field of science that examines the really complex interactions between genetic, epigenetic and environmental factors such as our stress levels, our emotions, the chemicals we're exposed to and the food we eat. So epigenetics, I guess they definitely are inherited, but they're not encoded within the gene. So really, I think about epigenetics as being really exciting because if nature and nurture were to converge, I believe it would be definitely here at this epigenetic level. Now, each person has a very unique biochemical individuality, a unique genomic background, and a unique microbiomic makeup. I'm just really briefly going to talk about this microbiomic makeup before I get into I guess how food can affect our genes and the concept of nutrigenomics, is that it's really important to know that the microbiomes which live in and on us actually outnumber our human cells by a factor of 10. So we have about 100 trillion microbiomes who actually make us who we are. And this is a really, really important thing to know. And when throughout the seminars, I will be brushing on our microbiomic makeup because it's fundamental to our health. And when I talk about food affecting our genes, I'm discussing a particular branch of epigenetics, and that's actually called nutrigenomics. So another concept of nutrigenomics is actually the concept of terrain management. So what I mean by that is the microenvironment that actually surrounds our cells. I think about that as being our terrain, and it's akin to soil. So, many things influence our terrain and many things influence our soil. And, our soil in turn affects our genetic and cellular and microbiomic function. So our nutrigenomics and epigenetics play into this terrain management and this ability to modulate our soil, and that's very important for longevity and good health as we age. So getting back to nutrigenomics and nutrigenetics, basically it's the study of how the foods and their various constituents actually interact with our genes to either increase or lessen our risk of chronic disease. So the genes we have interact with the food we eat, which ultimately plays towards and contributes towards the diseases we do or don't get. This means that what we eat can actually partially determine our genetic destiny, and that's really exciting. And we're in an era of personalised nutrition. There's lots of clinicians doing nutrigenomic testing, so they're personalising prescriptions for their patients. And epigenetic marks are highly plastic, and therefore they're highly responsive to our dietary factors as well and to our diets. So getting to the actual food side of things, this is one example for you. Garlic has been shown to influence both both our genetics and epigenetics, particularly associated with chronic disease, especially cancer. So this is some of the various ways how garlic does this. Garlic is simply one example of hundreds of thousands of phytochemicals. So they're isolating particular phytochemicals or plant-based chemicals, which are secondary plant metabolites, in the actual plant. So that can be fruits, vegetables, spices, herbs, nuts, seeds. They all contain these phytochemicals. So these are some other ones that have been really well researched. Sulforaphane, the top one there, in broccoli has actually had a lot of really exciting research done done around sulforaphane in broccoli in regards to cancer prevention, also referred to as the chemoprotective effects of broccoli. We've also then got, a lot of other ones there you'll be probably well versed with, so lycopene from tomatoes, for example. Turmeric, so curcumin that's found in turmeric actually has a history that dates back over 6,000 years, and it's the only herb with over 4,000 scientific articles published on its benefits. That's really, really exciting. And these plant compounds, I think of them as being natively intelligent. So when I go back to my take on real food and my definition of real food, it comes back to the fact that these foods have a particular intelligence about them and they're natively intelligent. And I really think that science is only just catching up with what nature can do for us and what nature's been doing has been doing for us for a very, very long time. This is a flowchart for you of different classes of phytochemicals. This is literally the tip of the iceberg. So, a lot of these phytochemicals that you've got on your screen here in these classes have been shown to have anti-inflammatory effects, anti-carcinogenic effects, antioxidant actions, anti-proliferative actions. So they're very powerful little compounds, and they do affect our genetic expression and our cell signaling. So this actually confers health benefits to us in a multitude of ways. Some of these phytochemicals you're probably well familiar with. As I just mentioned, lycopene there. So that's in your cooked tomato, and that's particularly been had a lot of, the spotlight on it for preventing prostate cancer and reducing the risk of prostate cancer, but only in its cooked form, and especially when there's been oil added to it as well. Down here, I wanted to show you the anthocyanidins. These are a beautiful class of flavonoids, and they're found in your brightly coloured berries. So this is why berries often have been said to be a bit of a superfood, because they contain high levels of these disease-fighting anthocyanidins. So there's thousands of chemical structures that have been identified, and thousands more that haven't even yet been identified. The moral of the story here is that these plant compounds, they actually have a very weak effect on their own, but I think about them acting as a spider web in the body, and their effects and their actions are both widespread and multidimensional. And it's really interesting that it's actually the food and not the isolated supplements that are the best source of these plant-based foods. So eating the whole foods is really important. This takes me to the concept of food synergy. So whole foods actually can contain up to 8,000 of these phytochemicals I was talking about. 8,000 is a lot, and these 8,000 up to 8,000 phytochemicals can actually work with each other, so they have a powerful synergistic effect. So all these health benefits that I'm talking about, they're not necessarily related to the isolated constituents. So taking out one phytochemical and synthesizing that in the lab and then popping it in a supplement and taking that. The benefits of doing that simply don't stack up to the benefits of having the food in its natural form and having the food in its whole form as well. So the bottom line is eat the rainbow, add a lot of colour to your plate. Ask yourself, do you have a colour deficiency on your plate? Pop this on your fridge. So this is something that I get a lot of patients to pop up on their fridge. Have one of each colour, at least one of each colour every single day. Now we're getting to the final part of the webinar here. So I thought it was fitting to discuss dessert with you. Now, dark chocolate, it's another powerful antioxidant because it contains these phytochemicals and flavonoids that are actually really similar to the flavonoids found in green tea, which is another potent antioxidant. Now, dark chocolate actually has about twice the amount of flavonoids as that milk chocolate you've got there. And what these do is that they help to reduce the risk of chronic disease by mitigating the effects of disease-causing free radicals. So they've actually done a study as well which shows that the benefits of this dark chocolate and the flavonoids actually wears off within about 22 hours. So, you know, I think it's a really healthy inclusion to your diet and to consume this regularly. Now, obviously, you've got to take this with a grain of salt in regards to moderation and not overdoing it, not overdoing any particular food. But when it comes to dark chocolate, it's simply about choosing quality. So make sure you're choosing cacao or cocoa solids that's over 70% cocoa. All right, so the take-home messages. Eat to be nourished. Smell, look, taste, feel, connect with your food and know where your food comes from. Number 2, remember that the food that we eat can actually influence our genetic potential. So foods speak to our genes. Number 3, eat foods as close to the natural source as possible. And number 4, choose whole foods. Number 5, being imperfect is actually imperfect. And what I mean by this is we don't need to strive to be perfect eaters, and small changes really can make a big difference to both how we feel and our overall health. There's actually some food pyramids from around the world that have 5 to 10% at the pointy end up the top, and this is actually called freedom food. And I think that that's a very healthy way of looking at your diet and a very healthy way of eating by not being too stringent with what you're doing and actually having a bit of soul food in there. Number 6, eat the rainbow. So enrich your diet with these disease-fighting phytochemicals and eat them together in a natural form. So remember that they have a synergistic effect and make sure that you don't have a colour deficiency. Number 7, no one will ever be more invested in your mental or physical health than you are. So listen to your body, listen to your intuition and fuel it properly. This is one of my favourite quotes from a lady called Dr. Carol Hungerford. Some of you may have heard her speak before at various land care forums. She's written a book called Good Health in the 21st Century, and I think that's a great book if any of you are interested in reading a bit more about what I've discussed tonight. So she says, we might arrive at the conclusion that our grandparents never questioned, that sunshine and exercise are good for you, that we need fresh air, adequate rest, and that we are what we eat. And I think that she sums it up brilliantly. So just finally recapping what the webinar series will be about. Part 2, I'm really going to get into the nitty-gritty of obesity. So obesity has become the single biggest health threat to public health in Australia, and this is frightening. And it's actually overtaken smoking as the leading cause of premature death and illness in Australia. But this obesity epidemic is actually being called globesity as well, because obviously it's not an Australian problem, it's a worldwide problem. So I'll be talking about what's fueling this and what we can do about it. Part 3 will be on inflammation, so more about what's stoking our inflammatory fire, what this means for our health and what foods can actually reduce inflammation within the body. Part 4 will be on brain food and nutrition for the brain. And Part 5 will be back to basics again with traditional eating and discussing more about the paleo diet and how we can introduce these concepts into our modern lifestyle. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I really appreciate you giving up your valuable time. If you do have any questions, please feel free to contact me via email or head to my website or give me a call. I hope to see you at the upcoming webinar series, and if you'd like a PDF of this slideshow as well, please feel free to email me and I will email you a PDF, and the recording of this is also going to be both on my website, which is listed there, and also on the RCS website. So thank you for RCS for giving me this opportunity, and I hope to see you all again soon or speak to you all again soon. Take care.